It was the first time this particular office had dealt with a conservation easement, and they didn't like it because if they had to repossess the farm, it has to stay a farm. It can't be used as a gravel pit. It can't be used as housing developments. It took a lot of convincing. It helped us get the purchase price down from the buyer, from the person we bought it from, and that ultimately was what sold them on it. You know, we were able to buy it at less than what it could be sold for otherwise.
We've made 2 major expansions of our potato storage operations, and in both of those cases we went to a state program called the Potato Market Improvement Fund, where the voters had passed an initiative which provided favorable lending rates for potato farmers that wanted to upgrade the quality of their potato storages, and that has been a real blessing to us, because as our operation had grown, we had to gain more efficiency within that operation, and that meant getting larger to become a little bit more mechanized. And the PMIF program allowed us to gain financing at a level that we could afford, plus there was engineering help with helping us plan as to how we should design the structure.
I think that a private bank certainly would lend money for the expanded beef operation, because I think the economics are there. I think that you know, we've spent a lot of time putting together a business plan to really show the economics and to show all the inputs, you know, and the expenses, and I think that's the key. The bank wants to see a business plan. They want to know where you're going to be in 3 to 5 years from now. They're willing to invest in you and in your business, but you have to treat it like a business, and that comes with starting with a business plan. You can't go in and sit at the bank and say, well, I got this idea and I need some money. And they want it on paper. They want to know exactly what the outcomes are going to be in 3 to 5 years, and then they're willing to probably take a gamble.
You know, I can remember there was a time when, as long as your equity was all right, you could go in and get money. You didn't have to worry about paying it back, just as long as your equity was all right. And then we went through a phase, well, just as long as you paid the interest. They didn't care, but just paid the interest. And then when the savings and loan thing blew up, now you got to make money on your tax returns. They want to see your tax returns. And the banking industry itself has gone through changes. Now, to look at it, how they treat agriculture, I don't think they treated agriculture any different than any other business. It was up to the business to go through the transitions that the bankers required.
In farm credits category of things, you are still considered, is it special? Or
No, other.
Other.
There's like a 5% pie when we see, like, there's a lot of money that's out there in the lumbering business because the capitalization is very high in that to build a sawmill or to get into those kind of machines. And potatoes is big. That's maybe a third. And dairy is big. Apples and fruit are smaller, but other is a tiny little piece, and that we are in other. But they're looking to, they know that the future of farming is in other, or a large part, and they're looking to always vary their portfolios. So
we had more problems trying to get a second mortgage with a conventional bank because they want to know how much do you make a week. Well, you know, some weeks you do pretty good. Some weeks you don't do so hot. It really bothered them not being able to come up with a weekly number. And Farm Credit speaks farm. They understand farms.
They understand that there's a lot of inputs before something happens. And also, our loan officer is one of our customers. He lives in Gorham, and that's very nice and to know that it goes both ways.
When we sold some of our cattle, and took that money to develop the store, Farm Credit was a little concerned because we were going into an area that they didn't normally loan money into. And I got a letter that reminded me that they didn't finance stores, they financed farms. But things can, you know, financially, things continued well for us, and because doing business with them, we do an annual report with them every year, and recently they've been commenting on how well the store is doing. Okay, and what I think it amounted to was we was venturing into an area that they weren't comfortable with, and now that they've seen that we're doing well, I hope it will make it a little easier for some other folks that try the same thing that we've done, because they've seen that probably our store is the most profitable aspect of this diverse farm.
Managing risks on sustainable agriculture farms. Sustainable agriculture farmers organize multiple enterprises into complex systems to reduce both production and marketing risks. The challenge is to manage these complex systems efficiently.
Complex systems are less likely to crash. And I think, you know, their long-term survivability are kind of more likely to be guaranteed by the complexity of our operation if we can manage it. I mean, that's the challenge of where we find ourselves, is keeping a lot of balls in the air and doing a reasonably good job at everything that we're attempting to do. But certainly, we know that last year, because of the drought, we had just a disastrous potato crop. But all the rest of the warm season crops, the tomatoes and the peppers and the eggplants and the melons and the sweet corn, they all did great. We just had huge crops of all those things because we do irrigate. So they kind of compensated for the fact if we had nothing but potatoes in the ground on all 36 acres, we'd have been thrashed. And we've had to compromise a lot. You know, when you focus on one or two crops, you can really get it down, and you get your production per acre up there as high as possible. And so with as many crops as we're growing, we're having to compromise between what's optimal for peas, which is optimal for carrots, you know what I mean? And so we've developed a system that, you know, pretty much works for all these things based on the machinery that we have and the machinery that we've acquired. And so we're not at optimal production for probably most of these crops. But because we're selling at a retail market, we don't have to. We don't have to optimize the
Gives
production.
us a margin.
Yeah. So it allows us to grow more things and to experiment more with different types of crops.
To me, diversity helps you avoid peaks and valleys, in that if you have an insurmountable problem in one season, have a crop failure in potatoes, then at least you've got other things that will bring income to the farm. If there are market conditions that exist, not only from the low side but the high side, I mean, if you're growing potatoes and the price goes out of them, then you've got other products that may bring a decent price. And the added wrinkle to that is, if you are growing something that is in demand and you can get a premium price for it, then you've done a little bit better that season, which is important to do every season that you can do it. It's one reason we came together as farms in a co-op, because we can reduce a certain amount of our transportation and marketing costs. We can reduce a lot of costs that come back to the farm gate price and help keep the farms viable.
I think you learn to prioritize. You learn to have the ability to absorb a lot of things that come at you, and you get to, and it's like any particular job, you get used to it and you get accustomed to it and how to handle it. And then there's those times when you just say, hold it, there's just too much coming in. Instead of letting it overwhelming you, you just say, okay, let's prioritize. And you sit down and say, this, and this need to be done first. I know over here is important, but this, and this are more important. And you tackle it, and you just take it one day at a time.
So we've really worked at trying to evaluate what in our system is making us money. And Chris has really pulled us over the years into the computer age in terms of our marketing end. We now use a computer for all of our invoicing, and that's also helped us to evaluate how much we're earning on different crops.
Our computer system, our software system, allows us to analyze exactly how many pounds of broccoli, carrots, tomatoes we've sold over the season and to whom. That way we know if we've sold $5,000 worth of salad mix and only $200 worth of scallions, is it worth using that space in the field for the scallions? We can quickly evaluate if it's worth growing that crop or not.
We're lucky to have a good relationship with our customers. They feel comfortable telling us if something costs too much, or they're comfortable at telling me that I should charge them more for something as well. We do meet with our customers over the winter, and we get a sense from them over the winter what they're interested in getting from us. And we try and plant according to that. We try and come up with an idea of how many pounds of broccoli weekly people are willing to take, how many pounds of salad greens, how many pounds of tomatoes, and we try to grow to fill those niches.
As we continue to the challenge of trying to be in a global market, I would say, or the big conglomerate business where the pennies is what they make per gallon, we have to try to plan our strategy so that we can win customers not just on a monetary merit. We have to have them, one, on a conviction of quality and loyalty, and that the fact is that they believe in what we do. And it's not just not a glass of milk, it's not a bowl of cereal with milk, or it's not just a bowl of ice cream or a spread of butter on a toast. It's they're buying the future of their area, of their community. They're presenting an opportunity for a business to thrive, that they can come and bring their grandkids or their children or themselves come out and look and see what we are doing to try to sustain agriculture in southern Franklin County.
Adding sustainable agriculture practices to industrial farms. Many larger industrial farms adopt sustainable agriculture practices but remain primarily industrial with a focus on a few commodities. While these practices can improve the farming operation, these farms do not become biologically or community integrated for most of their production.
Suffice it to say, we modify the environment to help the production of our apples, and we've done a lot of research and ways of doing that. We're firm believers in a microenvironment, meaning that I believe that Earth, that the whole world is one environment, that things that are done in South America affect us here in America, things that we do may affect people in Europe or Asia, but I also believe that that is one version of the environment, but there's also very much environments within one farm, and not one farm like ours that's spread out, but one farm in Turner as opposed to one next door in the next town in Buckfield. The microenvironment may be different, the populations of the different insects, the soil, whether the amount of organic matter in the soil, all these things may be different from one farm to another, and we can modify those so that accentuates the quality of the fruit that we get off and the amount of outside inputs that we have to put in to grow that quality fruit. And we've been doing the integrated pest management with the good bugs versus the bad bugs. From my grandfather taught me things that he's been doing for generations, and a lot of new things we've brought in. Well, we went down with a farm that we bought in New York and tried to implement the stuff we were doing up here, and we had very little luck because the environment we've modified over 200 years here. And things were done much differently on the farms we took over down there, and it's been a very painful, slow process of trying to change that environment to be more conducive to the way that we like to grow apples. And but specifics you won't get from me.
We got into the compost business back in the early 90s because of a disposal issue. The common practice was finding an area, a rock pile or something on a farm that you dump any off grades or anything that you couldn't market. We didn't have enough cattle to feed them, so we'd find a spot, we'd dump them, and with the size operation, we get into an issue that, you know, is an environmental issue, and so we decided that we would try it on a trial basis, and we use cull potatoes. We use sawdust byproducts from some of the mills around, and we use a fly ash from the energy plants, which is it's a waste product also. So we actually take 3 waste products from 3 different industries, and we mix them together and come up with a high quality soil amendment. It's a beautiful product, and we were able to put that back onto our fields or sell it to gardeners, but it's high in nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, everything that a potato has. So we find that if you have a knoll that's down on fertility, and those years that you come in and you crop on your grain crops, and you put the lentil rye or clover or whatever you do underseed it with, that won't produce as much straw, it won't produce as much lentil rye, and it won't produce the amount of organic matter that you need. So you're already at a deficit, now you're producing a little bit less, and it puts you further in a deficit. And once you get on that curve, it just continues to slide down unless you can go in and intervene somehow. And we do it with compost. And then in the next year it comes back, we get more straw, we get more lentil rye or clover, and you're back, so that you start building over those weak areas again. So it works.
Back in '96, we decided to actively look for something to diversify in, trying to use our natural assets and farmland and whatever else we had to help support ourselves. And at the time, cranberries looked to have good potential. We went out and studied the cranberry production in Wisconsin, decided we could do it and do it as good or better than other people, and that's where we like to position ourselves. And the market had been quite profitable, hugely profitable compared to the apple industry. And then we were going to put in a couple of acres, and my father came in with something he believes in, and I do, even though it's been painful in this instance, that we really shouldn't do a couple of acres because I would just baby it, and we knew that I could make it work, he could make it work if we babied it. We ought to plant 7 or 8 acres, and then we'd have to use our employees to do it and see if we could do it on an employee basis, not with somebody babying it, and make it profitable. Well, my 7 or 8 buffaloed into 14 acres over the next 3 years, and we borrowed a huge amount of money to have what I'm quite proud of is a very nice cranberry marsh. But meanwhile, the market for cranberries has gotten quite a bit smaller. It seems that the 85 cents a pound that they were offering contracts on when I started was a little high for what the bottlers wanted to pay, because it was more expensive than the other juice. So within a year, all of the formulators changed their formulation, and cranberries, the cranberry use dropped by 33% in 1 year. And for those of you who studied economics, if you drop the demand, it's like the same effect as if you were to increase the supply. And in the meantime, the supply has been slowly increasing, and the difference has dropped cranberries from 85 cents to 45 cents to 20 cents to this year they're talking 8 to 10 cents. The cost of harvest is around 20 cents. And that would be for use in juice. We use that as our hedge, the juice prices, but our intention totally was to do fresh cranberries because we are in the fresh apple business, and we're used to dealing with fresh and the quality things that you need to take care of in fresh, and we have the distribution system in the markets. And so we went to some of our best customers for apples and sat down with them to figure out what their cranberry use and what their interests were. And we told them that we would give them redder, larger cranberries than what they were able to harvest elsewhere, able to purchase elsewhere. And we've had some on the market the last couple of years, just test marketing because we had a small amount. This year we're going to have nearer full commercial production, and they're bigger and they're redder. It says it right on the packages, and
Can't miss it.
we guarantee that. And we hope not only to make this profitable in reverse of what the industry is doing, but also to get people to enjoy fresh cranberries on a longer season.
The consumption of broccoli was going up, so we went to California and looked at that broccoli production, and we talked to people in the markets, and we figured that, yes, maybe that was something else that we could do. And we talked to consumers, or not consumers, but actually buyers within the market with respects to what they thought of Maine broccoli and what some of the where the weaknesses were of the broccoli that was coming in, and we identified some of those. The first year that we were in the broccoli business, we were harvesting in the field in tote boxes, and it came back. It came into the shed. We dumped the tote boxes on a line, and we had girls in there that were actually putting the bunches together and putting them in the machine and banding them, and they were culling. Mid-season, we had people coming in with bags, and they'd stand there and they'd pick that good broccoli out of the culls because there was nothing wrong other than, the stem wasn't long enough to make a bunch. So we looked at that and said, there's got to be something that we can do to market that. We put a lady there, and all she did was pick up those broccoli bunches, or not the bunches, but the broccoli heads that were at a broken stalk, and she would trim them. And we call them shortcuts. We'd trim them short, just down below the head, and we packed those in boxes, and we'd get a pallet. We'd send them into DeRigo's in New York and say, this is perfect broccoli. There's nothing wrong with it other than it's not bunched. There's no stalk on it. See what you can do about marketing this. See if you can get something out of it. So I think they started about $1 a carton less. During the week we didn't have any broccoli. They had Oriental people coming in, and they wanted that shortcut. And so the next week they started charging them $1 more, so it became a premium product.
We have, I believe, 40 acres of organic apple production, maybe more, and we have organic vegetables. We're harvesting today some organic zucchini. We've got things like garlic.
Organic garlic.
Organic garlic and organic...
onions, organic. He's doing the whole...
Number of the perennial stuff especially, plus some of the squash.
Pumpkins, organic pumpkins.
We're even working on ginseng, wild organic ginseng, which is something else that we first started back in '97. We're looking to diversify. That takes 7 years to come into production. Apple growers are terribly patient. We should learn to get into different things, but that has been rather painful because in order to get apples and tree fruits into organic, you have to go through a 3-year transitional process, and it seems that the organic customers don't like to purchase the stuff when it's in transition. It's all grown to the certified organic standards, but just because the trees have been treated with non-organic chemicals earlier, that has to be in this transitional status. And so we've gone through great expense and a large amount of learning to learn how to grow very high quality apples organically, and then sold most of them just with our regular IPM grown apples. And but we know there's a market there, and we've got a lot of people that are already buying our stuff, and they're enthusiastic to continue buying it, and we think that's going to be a good diversification for us, but it's very much supply and demand. So it all depends on what other producers do. But we see that as a good market, and we have a lot of time and effort into figuring out how to get the consistent quality that people are used to buying our product and doing it organically.
You know, there was a considerable difference in the broccoli, standard broccoli market and the organic broccoli market. We had some conversations with some customers and saying that, you know, we could probably do that. Is that something they'd be interested in? Is that something they needed? And you know, and I'm not sure how it originally developed. It may have been a customer that said, "Hey, do you have organic broccoli?" But we started looking at it, and then we started looking at the possibilities of producing it, and then what type of rotation we would get into. We decided to do an organic plot of broccoli, and I think it's been 3 years now. We've been in a program for food grade organic soybeans. So we're in the soybeans, the wheat. I was looking for alternative for grain, and Jim Armorall from Borealis Breads was up here, and he was looking for organic wheat. So that fit. That was a good niche for us. So we've stuck with broccoli, soybeans, and wheat. It's a good rotation for us, and it seems to be working.
The 1%, maybe 0.5% of the marketing is retail. We just got into that as figuring it would be one more addition to the cash flow for the fall. It's a 6-week. Get into it for 6 weeks, get out of it. Pick your own apples. It's a family entertainment. It's cheap. It's cheaper than going to the movies. Kids like it. Just do a few add-ons with pet and feed the animals. I make more money on grain, I think, than anything. Little hayride through the orchard. It's just, you got to keep the mom and dads happy, take the kids out, give them a little exercise. And we have three farm stands that we run like that. We bought 2 of them from families that were getting out of the business, and basically we didn't change anything. People liked that family. They were really sad to see it go, and we said, well, I actually hired the wife to say, you stay here. That's who they come to see, not me. They want to see you in here. So she's still running one of them for me. We have one in Auburn, one in Waterford, and one in Standish. And they're good little operations.
I don't know whether I got it from my dad or, but he always continually grew and looking for ways to grow, and saw a niche in the market to fill, and responded to that. I admire, I'll use the name, I admire a guy like Jim.